Hey everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Kara Burrell. Sometimes I go by Nuance Ho. Sometimes I make TikToks. Sometimes I appear on Mormon Stories. And sometimes I'm in my bedroom / home studio inviting my friends over who talk about things that I also like to talk about. And they join me and we make videos together. And sometimes I have a baby crying at the door. 1 second. Aaron, come step in the frame so you know that I'm alone in a bedroom with another man.
What is
Give me your
going
thumbs
on
up.
here?
If you're happy,
live
you know it,
streaming
give
right
me a big smile. All right, Kyle, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Kyle, if you don't know, we're going to plug all of your stuff and everything that you do at the end and in the description, because I think that if we just start immediately, you guys will be so convinced that you need to follow him on all social media platforms and then call him up and say, please coach me through my life transition process. I think we'll just make the case as we keep talking. I don't need to sell you. Kyle has my endorsement as just, I love talking about these subjects, and Kyle is a great articulator of it. He's got the best memes. He has this arsenal of just everything that's ever been talked about. He has a meme arsenal of good quotes, good ideas, good things to share. And I think you will be absolutely enamored with him by the end of this discussion.
I do.
I will sell you that hard. I don't just invite any random guy into my bedroom / home studio. I'm choosy.
I'm honored.
Yeah.
Honored to be here.
Nuance Ho.
So, gonna get right into it with the jokes. This one's been on my mind. So, Kyle, thanks for being here. I realized that I've been making a lot of YouTube videos with men lately. I'm calling up random 40, 50, 60-year-old men on a daily basis. Hey, Bill Reel, you wanna make a video with me? Or hey, John Larson, or hey, John DeLynn, or hey, Kyle, or the list goes on and on. Mark Osland. And I'm just it's getting to the point where, I was John last video that I made that he came over with, and he texted me afterwards. He was like, "Oh, that video is pretty successful. I knew that you and I worked well on Mormon Stories together, and it's good to know that when I'm on your channel, we still knock it out of the park, Kara." And I didn't text this back to him. I didn't say this, but now I will say it. The joke that's been on my mind is just, if I only knew that to be a successful woman, all I had to do was just invite more men into my bedroom, I would have done it sooner. So getting all of that out of the way, statistically speaking, I believe that 9 out of 10 people who leave the Mormon church do not go join another religion, right? And I remember hearing that quote from Sam and Tanner on Zelf on the Shelf right when I was deconstructing Mormonism, and that made me feel very sad. And I remember thinking oh no, because there's still so many other truths in Christianity and so many other things that they could go into. And that made me feel very sad that so many people leave an obviously, untrue religion like Mormonism that's got a lot of harmful problems in it, and they don't go search after the right God or whatever. And I had to reach the conclusion that those 9 out of 10 people, solid people who
Good arguments.
They probably found some arguments that I just probably hadn't bumped into yet, and they were not able to find sufficient reasons to go join another religion, and that's a dope thing to do. No shade on them whatsoever, is what I came to. But immediately it made me sad, and I think a lot of people who are, whether they're Mormon or they're just of any religion, they feel really sad when they hear that there are people who left the church and they didn't go keep seeking after truth in the ways that I found truth through religion. There are people in your life who, the way that they're searching for less bullshit, more authenticity, should not make you upset. It should give you a lot of respect that they are going after what makes the most sense to our rational minds. They're not going after a new life that's pursued on a destiny of sin. They're trying to live with less lies and more authenticity. Mm-hmm. And so the idea around this video is what Kyle does when he's coaching. And he has a lot of people that come to him and they're in a faith transition point of view. And there's a lot of people who are throwing judgments about, should I, what will my parents think if I make this choice that's going to be out of alignment with the way that I was raised? I'm having a coffee maker in my house now. Should I be able to hide that? And how to go from, okay, you were in a system where your whole life revolved around this communal conversion based on pleasing your parents, based on pleasing the people around you, that's based on lies now. And now what are you going to do with that information? You know it's a lie. You know that you need to step into something else. Where are you going to go with that? And so we're just going to dig and dig and dig on the subject of less lies and more authenticity, and how Kyle got there, how I got there. And then I want people in the comments to like leave as long of stories as you feel like sharing about if you were in the third person in this conversation, how you get from that space of being so conditioned for bullshit, for people pleasing, for like the type of communication in Mormonism that's very passive aggressive, and to still being kind and thoughtful with the ways that you express yourself around maybe believing family and friends, but that you're able to do it with authenticity and that you're able to actually step into that. What does that look like? How do you get there? It's the whole meaning and purpose of life. That to me, you get 90 years, and I feel so sad for people who spend so much of their lives not being able to live in authenticity and living in all those things I mentioned.
The first step in being able to deconstruct is learning how to deconstruct. And in order to do that, you have to be able to accurately distinguish between what is likely to be bullshit and what is likely to be true. And that's a very challenging thing, considering our wiring is sending us straight down the bullshit path.
What do you mean?
We want we want pretty lies over, like we'd rather be kissed with a lie than slapped with the truth.
And do you think that comes from our conditioning or do you think that's just part of our evolution?
I think that we're socially conditioned, and I think also we are hardwired to move away from pain and toward pleasure.
Sure.
And pain is a vast spectrum. I mean, it can be like your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend walking toward you on the sidewalk. You see them and your brain goes, oh no. To there's a saber-tooth tiger chasing you. It's like that whole spectrum from like mild awkward encounter to like you're gonna die. All of that is pain in your brain, lumps it together as if it's all the same. So one of the things that I've shared with my clients is a story that illustrates how completely wired we are to believe in things that are not true and that don't even have hardly any evidence that they're true. We're wired to believe those things, and I want to share a story about when I was attending BYU. I was taking a sociology course in Salt Lake, and the organization of the class was unique in that the teacher didn't teach for most of the lesson. So at the very beginning of the semester, each student got to choose a topic, and then they were to present on it for like the first hour of class, and then the last half hour of class, our professor would come in and she would mention things that are going to be on the final or whatever that we didn't actually hear in the students thing, but they were to present the information. And the topic that I found most interesting was on persuasion. And of course, when you think about historical events that have to do with persuasion, the most famous one virtually is the story of Hitler and how he got so many people to believe in his scheme, and obviously the terrible impact and aftermath that that's had on our world. And more than just reiterating what everybody had already heard in this class about what Hitler had done, what I wanted to do was to recreate what Hitler did and do that to my class. So the way that I did this is I
like how you go to my class. For that hour, they were mine. What did you do to your class?
So what I did to my class is I wanted to take something that was so fundamentally agreed upon by everyone everywhere, which there's not a whole lot of things because of the mass variety of differing belief systems. So I took an idea that everyone already virtually believed in, which was that the sky is blue. You pop out of the womb, it's one of the first things you get down. As a kid, it's okay, sky, blue, got it. What I wanted to do to my classmates was to convince them otherwise and to see if I could do it. And so I took all of the examples of what Hitler did in order to deceive people and how he was so effective at it, and used those same strategies to get my classmates to agree in about something that was so ridiculously not true. So the way that I started it was Hitler was really good at getting people of authority to believe in him, because people look to authority figures and they believe those people, they want to follow them. They have the street cred, and they're the experts, and so they're the people that you believe. And so I reached out to my professor in advance and I said, hey, I'm going to do this presentation. I basically told her, I'm going to be lying to everyone. I need you to go along with it. Everything that I say, I want you to just be like, yup, that. And it was totally bullshit. But that way I had a person of authority that everyone in the class obviously looks up to, the teacher, if not for the threat of being failed, that she was also kind of a cool person as well. But in addition to that, I also realized in the textbook, Hitler was really good at getting average people, like, your neighbor, people who are on your level, who you can relate with, or just, good moms, dads, families who are just trying to make a living and live a good life. You wanted to get those people as well. So in my class, there was this student, and she was very intelligent. She was also very pretty. People liked when she voiced her comments because they were very well crafted, very well articulated. And so I also called her in advance and I gave her the same spiel that I gave my professor. You need to go along with what I'm going to say. And she was like, this is going to be so much fun. And so she was totally on board to do it, because when you're LDS, very often, or very, very rarely, do you get the chance to be the devil. So this was really fun. It was actually surprisingly how quickly everyone who was involved was like, yes,
got to be
let's
naughty.
do that. I know. The thing we've been repressing.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Did it
my
in a tank top too. She's like, if I'm gonna play the part, I'm gonna play the part.
little kid stamp-on tattoo, like,
Yeah. She's
Hail Satan.
letting everyone know she's on the devil's side with her wrong opinions and tank tops and tattoos. Continue.
So, I looked at some of the other things. Once I had these two people on board with me, I looked at the other examples of what Hitler did. So one thing is that he was always presented in a very attractive way. Nice suit. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take this and make it look as good as possible. Challenge accepted, and I did my best. Got dressed up, got authorities on my side, got average Joe on my side. I exploited half-truths. And what that means is I took something that people had heard of so that they'd go along with it. Go, oh, I've heard of that, But it was a topic that they did not know very much about. And so when I went, I kind of passed the point where people would remember what they went over in science class as kids. They had no idea, which basically gave me the space to put in as much bullshit as I wanted, because they go, oh yeah, I've heard of that. I don't remember this part, but like the brain doesn't want to believe that everyone is just lying to them, because that's painful. Because then who can you trust? And so the brain is naturally like, we don't want to go toward that. And so, boom, that's more power for me. And that's something that's just hardwired into the human brain, which I, being a con man, can fully exploit.
Glossing over things that you kind of got the gist of in science class, and you can throw different words in there, but manipulate them in ways that make it sound like you know what you're talking about. And people should respect your authority. So many names are coming to mind right now. People I know who do that. So, interesting.
The quorum of the what?
No, they're not that advanced. But
That's another level.
yeah. But, just throwing out some jargon. Like, somebody is taking notes right now on how to start their own cult. They're like, oh, it's that easy? So, then what did you do?
It's actually fairly easy.
Then what happened, Kyle?
So what I wanted to, the part that I knew they had heard about before, but they didn't know hardly anything about, in addition to just the basic facts, was rods and cones in your eye. And so I made up this completely ridiculous pseudoscientific idea where I said that a 6-month-year-old, and I chose a 6-month-year-old because they can't communicate what they're actually seeing. And so there's no way that anybody could prove me wrong, because there's going to be no 6-month-year-olds who are saying, that's not what I saw. And so I took these, I said, okay, so rods and cones in the eye, right? Like the rods are for black and white and the cones detect color. Okay, we're on board with that. And then the part that I added in was that when you're 6 months old, there's this membrane around your eyeball that gets absorbed into the body. And before that absorption takes place, you're actually viewing colors as they actually are, which is the polar opposite of how we see them once that membrane has been absorbed into the body.
Sounds plausible.
Totally plausible. And it's bullshit. But that's kind of how it goes. A lot of things that we think are plausible, because it's like, oh, I've heard that before. Totally bullshit. This is a total side note, but people who are like atheists don't have morals. My morals as an atheist are the only thing stopping me from starting a cult and exploiting the stupid people in this world who are so easily persuaded and bamboozled into total bullshit. So that's the thing that's stopping this atheist. It's morals. So atheists don't have morals. So now at some point in my presentation, I knew I would have to find some way to gauge if people believed me or not without coming out and saying, so do you believe what I just said? Because that would give it away.
Yeah.
And so I made up this story about how my uncle was the one who is publicizing this, this thing on CNN where it's going to be talking about it, and he wants to get the word out. Totally stupid, but again, not very hard to deceive people. And so I said, okay, so my uncle who's putting on this CNN thing, he wants to see if everybody, he asked me to ask you guys, to invite you, a very common LDS phrase, which of course I exploited. We invite you. And I said, will you talk to 2 people before you go to bed tonight about this? Because that was the way I can kind of figure, like, if they're willing to talk to 2 people, whether or not they actually did it, don't know. And there wasn't, an actually perfect scientific way that I could judge the degree to which people in my class believed me, but like it served its function, you know, for them to say yes or no. And so on the whiteboard, I wrote yes and I wrote no. Big letters, underlined them. And of course, I asked everybody this question. I started with the people who I knew were already on my side. So I started with my professor. It's like, would you be willing to do this? And one by one, I went through the class. So started with the professor, boom. There's something under yes, there's nothing under no. And
You
then,
should have just done boom, boom, cross, A, walk out. You already scored. You already did it. What was like the demographics of this class? We got cool girl who everyone likes. We've got
Okay, I know how to do
Professor
this.
Lazy Pants. Who else is sitting around?
people fell into one of three groups. Group number one, without me needing to push or persuade at all, they just immediately believed it. And I could tell because their jaw hit the floor. It's like, wow, like the sky is red? And the hardest part of this entire presentation was not laughing, because I saw that people were just like immediately like, we're here in a school. This is where we learn stuff. And the stuff that we learn is obviously true because we don't learn not true stuff at school. And so there's just this culture of whatever you hear in this, you know, learning stuff place, it's going to be true. And the girl who believed me right off the bat was a foreign exchange student. And her situation is interesting because she's not from the United States. So what is her brain thinking? Don't be the awkward, weird foreigner. Like, don't say stupid things. Fit in
in with the
blend
culture,
well. Yeah. And so instantly she's like, she was a prime target, like to believe in all this bullshit that I was talking about. And so that was camp number one. Camp number two was people so there's one student, and this girl in my class, she knew from the very beginning that I was completely full of shit. She knew that my chapter was persuasion. She probably read through. She knew exactly what I was up to. And her demeanor the entire time that I was giving the presentation was this. It's like, it was just like, she could have just put fuck you on her forehead. Like, I'm not falling for this bullshit. And out of, propriety, I'm just going to sit here and suffer through this presentation, even though I know exactly what you're up to. And then group number three, which was basically everybody else. Most of the people fall
Really?
into the category of, I'm going to hear you out, but I'm a little skeptical. Persuade me. That was camp number three. So anyway, at the end of this is I have yes and no written on the board, and I start with my professor. She says yes, she's willing to tell two people, and then I go to the other student that I was in cahoots with, and she was like, yeah, absolutely, I would totally do this. She was very emphatic about like, of course I would do this. And then I kind of snaked through the classroom, kind of picking and choosing people who I knew were going to go along with it. And by the time I had like 7 to 10 yeses and no nos, I knew you're fucked. Really? No one is going to go against me because our desire to conform is the price we pay to get love and acceptance.
Yes.
And that's the currency of life. And that's what it is. That's what people are after. And we will believe whatever. And there's a lot of like really painful, inconvenient truths that we when we explore them, we have to kind of make up our minds about, okay, are we okay being kissed with a lie, or are we going to be slapped with the truth? Because our wiring is very much like we want the kiss from the lie because that's so much more pleasant. So that is the program that is always running in your brain at all times, and it impacts the things that you believe. And if we're not aware of that, like the foreign exchange student, we are prime suspects for people who end up in cults, for people who fall prey to scams. There's a lot of things there that just, it's not where we want to be, but we only can realize that if we come to the radically honest realization that we're not wired to not be bamboozled. Our wiring just makes us prime candidates for being suckered, and that's not how we want to obviously live, but you have to admit that to yourself, and then you start looking at evidence in a more skeptical way. So...
yeah, just in the same way that I remember thinking about the way that like my parents converted to the Mormon church, and in that old idea that like what you don't have at home, you'll find somewhere else. You'll find from like a man, you'll find from like a pimp, you'll find a way to fill that void in one way or another. And then on top of that, if you don't know, you haven't deconstructed, if you haven't done enough introspective work on yourself to understand why you're seeking after not just even healthy things in your life, forget religion, like whatever you're seeking after to fill that void that wasn't met in another way, and you're meeting it and you're coping it with it in another way, that's one level of it. And then on top of that, if you understand, like, I'm also wired to search for these things, whether they're not true, whether they're not helpful, whether they're not serving, but my brain is wired to seek after comfort and go against pain. Once you come to all of these different radical truths and you wake up at a certain point, whether you could be 20 years old or 40 years old,
Yeah.
you get to that point of radical honesty, like you just mentioned. All of these things they're either just not true, and I need to stop being okay with being kissed with a lie. Just give me the hard facts, even if it slaps me in the face.
Yeah.
And then I might have some behaviors I'm engaging in, or there might be some people in my life, or there might be some addictions that I have that are now, they're not serving because they're all just like trying to fill something in that place. I feel like all of the stuff that we talk about with deconstruction, all of it just has to all inner work, and it kind of is all just based around honesty. I don't know.
Yeah. No, radical honesty has to precede the deconstruction process, because if you aren't going to be honest, what are you even doing kidding yourself that you're going to deconstruct? And so one of the things that I invite clients to do is take something that you fucking need to be true and go question it. Go really, like for a lot of people, it's that, like, I have to believe, like, there's no way that on this planet that Allah is not real. You know, like people before him, like that people thought that Poseidon wasn't real. There weren't that many, you know. You take what you absolutely, like, no, I know this for absolute sure. But the problem is a lot of things that we take is, you know, absolute, undeniable truth, because that was indoctrinated into us. We never had a moment where we actually were critically, you know, where we critically examined the foundation for that, you know, claim that we believe is 100% true, that, like, it rests on. You have to look at the things that you're like, okay, this has to be true. That's where you start. Because if you're not going to go to those truths that make you feel really vulnerable, like, what if there is no God?
Yeah, what are some more just like easier surface level things? Because I'm thinking of all of the stuff of just people thinking, like, there's so many lies that people invent, like, whether it's down to just self-image of, like, something that I need to believe is untrue is, like, I'm ugly, or, like, I need to believe is, like, I don't fit in here, or I need to believe so many things that keep you in a space of confined growth, no matter what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That, like, there's so many things that we tell ourselves that are just lies that people have psychologically found independence, and it's just a pillar of their entire mental health.
Yeah.
Whether it's God things or, like, what you build your whole life on. So, since society is just made up, newsflash, this is just people were floating on a rock. Some people got some power. Some people got some ideas. They had some good feelings about them, and they spread those ideas around. A lot of stuff has happened in the entire history of human civilization. Newsflash, it's all just people making up stuff. Some stuff works, some stuff doesn't. So question everything.
Yeah.
It's just somebody's ideas that put things into place. There's very few just, like, eternal truths. Like, some of them, you know, like, generally, I think we're all just better if, like, you don't hurt people and don't harm people.
Yeah.
It's just, like, hardcore stick to that. But you can question just about everything.
Yeah.
And so what were you going to say about when you tell your clients to just start with questioning? Look at something that you absolutely need to depend on having it be true, and then tell them to ask what about it.
Yeah. So basically, the reason why I bring this whole topic up with them is that in the deconstruction process, there are going to be so many hard pills to swallow. And if you've drawn a line like, I'll go up to here, but I won't go any further, that's where your deconstruction ends. Radical honesty is so important, because you have to acknowledge that you don't know everything. And that sounds so obvious, because there's very few people who are going around saying, I know everything. But then when you look at, you know, the things that they say, this is absolutely true, and they don't really have a good argument, and yet they just hold to it, regardless of what evidence comes, you know, to disprove that claim or that ideology or that belief or that behavior.
So true. And I think, man, there's so much I didn't realize that how many tangents we could go on that subject. Just even down to the basis of persuasion. Some people could say that you and I are almost in the business of persuasion. That we're in the business of saying, this is the way the world is. There's no God. Mormonism's not true.
Yeah.
And we're going to sit here making videos convincing you of it. And I personally think that I'm just telling you the reasons I came to, and, like, I'm calling a spade. You're doing the same and trying to give that out to people. But there's so many people who their biases are against wanting to listen to anyone like us, so they'll invent reasons why they can't listen. Some people, the reason they invent is because I'm a woman. Some people, the reason they invent is because his name's Kyle and he's wearing a backward baseball cap. So sometimes people, they need to find stereotypes, they need to find reasons to, you know, live out their biases, where it's anything except for radical honesty.
Yeah.
And that's what I realized really early on in my faith deconstruction, because I didn't want to listen to anyone who had a different color hair that was unnatural. This is fake as fuck. It's blonde, but I fit in with the Utah basic bitches. I have to join them to beat them.
The price of love in Utah.
We have to look like them to beat them, you guys. No. I didn't want to listen to anyone who was like a commie socialist, atheist, like SJW, Antifa looking member. Because I was like, therefore, if I have anyone who's in that category, I don't have to have any kind of radical honesty about the things they're saying. I'm allowed to judge them prematurely. And I even have a video about that. It's like one of my most famous videos about the Mormon brain on the internet. And I'm talking about my brain on the internet of like the person who said this about Joseph Smith, like what color's their hair. And it's like, oh, it's like, well, just tell them there's some dumb liberal who wanted to say it anyway. But like, no, they look like quite the basic bitch, actually. Like, what if their arguments have merit regardless? Like, we're so wired towards bullshit that we want to do everything in our power to not listen to the person who is making completely rational arguments that we know deep down, if we allow ourselves to really sit with them, your whole life might fall apart. You might have just pillar after pillar of other things that your life depends on being true.
Yeah, for sure.
Just knocked down one after another.
Yeah. Well, it's like you're more likely to believe somebody who you love. And like that right there is a problem, because anybody who's listening to this can, like, imagine some part of the world that does not believe in your religion, and you look at those kids being indoctrinated with that belief system, which you think is absolutely ridiculous. And it should be so obvious, right? Because these people are crazy. Like, Muhammad did not get on a horse and ride to the moon and cut it in half. But like, that's a fundamental part of Islam. I mean, it's not fundamental. It's part of the dogma, though, and it's so crazy.
Figuratively.
Yeah. But then we look at, like, all these literal things, like in LDS Church, the devil has power over the water. It's like, is there any scientific evidence whatsoever that could back that up? Spoiler alert, homeschoolers, there's not. So, but your mom told you that, and your mom loves you, so why would your mom lie to you? Therefore, mom is right, devil has power over the water. And so you do it. Because belief is the price that you pay to get love and acceptance from your family, your community, your friends. And so what we want is love. And if I was, one of the uncomfortable things that I've had to come to terms with is that if I was born in a radical, ISIS family, the thought of me being a suicide bomber would be one of pleasure, not of pain. Because of the ideology that surrounds that. And if you can't see yourself as somebody, like, it's like how we look at, Germans during World War II and we think, those pieces of shit. It's like, those people are you.
Yeah, the idea that given the circumstances, if you were born into that family with that conditioning, under those pressures, that you would have done differently. There's really no reason to believe that, whether you're born into an ISIS family or little Hitler's Youth family, or you're Mormon. And anyway.
It's like if you can't imagine yourself as a guard at Auschwitz, even deriving pleasure from what you are doing, you do not understand yourself at all. And that is not a fun thing to be able to understand. It's the brain's natural wiring, again, of pursue pleasure, avoid pain. It's not pleasureful. It's very painful to imagine that could actually be you, that you're the guy that would be doing something like that. But until you actually acknowledge that you could be that guy, you don't actively start preventing yourself from being taken advantage of in a system that makes you that guy.
All right, so now that we know that we could be that person, that we are prone to believing bullshit, how in the world did we even become conscious enough to be able to say that, to get to the other side, to look back and reflect? Because are we not still stuck in a system right now? I mean, I believe that would be my snarky little Mormon take if I were arguing with you. Be like, how are you so sure that you're not just swallowing bullshit right now? Because I had this Holy Spirit tell me that I'm correct. How are you so positive that you're just not stuck in a cycle of bullshit right now?
So it's the method through which you find truth is what it is. Because when I was raised LDS, I was introduced to the concept of faith, and that faith took place when there wasn't much evidence to go off of, but we were praised for, despite the massive lack of evidence, that these things were just true, and then you got bombarded with love for believing these things. Now, as I left, I was subject to a lot of bad treatment. I was subject to, first of all, I was not wired to want to go through where I was. So I thought, look where your wiring would want you to go.
Right.
Like, what would be the most, like if you could, make the world the way that you wanted it to be, where would your brain, what would that look like for you? Where would you want that to go? And when you imagine that place, you should immediately distrust it because you're going with your wiring for bullshit, right? I mean, truth will ruin your day. Like, ruin the whole afternoon.
And again, going back to that concept though of like, I feel like we are so biased to search for everything in our minds that tell us that no, you're not searching after radical honesty. You're searching after like the natural man or like a carnal nature. And there's those quotes from the church that are like, it's definitely harder to be a Latter-day Saint than it is to leave. What do you have to say about that, though? That there are people out there who are like, no, like you're just being radically honest to the portions of yourself that just want to live a sinful life because it's harder to show up at 9 a.m. on Sunday and give a lesson.
Yeah. As I've talked to people who've deconstructed, and with my experience as well, the pain that you experience leaving the church is the most intense, excruciating pain you'll ever experience. Mm-hmm. Staying in the church was the easy way out for me because I got to keep my family, got to keep my friends, got to keep my belief system. I got to go with the flow with what is normal for around here. Mm-hmm. And so to assume that like it was the easy way out, it's like, what would I would ask people who are listening, what would you give in exchange for your family's love? Not a whole lot. And the fact that us, the people who have deconstructed, the people who have left, have had to put family and friends and community and love and acceptance by the people you've relied on your entire life, hang that in the balance and then go through with it. I mean, to say like, oh, that's, you just want to sin. I mean, I don't care how you masturbate. It's not so good that it's worth that.
Yeah. There's us. And then there's to the next degree, I think also our brains, again, they're biased towards, all right, well, I think if somebody were to say that to me when I was Mormon, my brain would just scan of what's the exception to that rule, and I'm going to make that the rule now. So what I mean by that is like I would scan my brain and think of all the people I know that they didn't deconstruct the church. They just left when they were teenagers, or they did just kind of leave to sin. Like people who were never really in it, and now you just assume everybody who leaves is just somebody who's like that friend, that family member, that person that you knew, and you make that exception the new rule. Because somebody just, and the reason why they left, they weren't that invested and sin was better to them. But for the people who you're thinking of who were truly converted in a way, they served a mission, they put that in their time, they paid their tithing, they faithfully felt like they had a conversion that, changed their hearts and their minds, and they lived the gospel with all of their heart, might, mind, and strength, to then know that that's how they're biased. You have to be radically honest that some people have every bias to keep conforming to all of those things that they were taught, all of the endorphins that they get, all of the love that they get from their family. Could be more radically honest that whoever you're thinking of that just lead to sin, they are probably the exception because it is life shattering for most people. It was for me.
Yeah, and assuming oh, this person just wants to have sex and not feel guilty about it. It's like, really, like, there's no sex that exists on this planet that is worth losing the love of your family and your friends and your entire community and being shunned and being, like, not just ignored, but actively, just self-righteously critiqued and judged. And to, take your good, beautiful heart that wants to be loved and that wants to be a good person, and then to be reduced down to the stereotype of you just wanted to sin is just so asinine and dead inside that you could say that to somebody is wild.
I've got a great analogy that I just thought of. And another thing that's wrong with that idea is that it is so simplistic to think that you can be raised in a religion that teaches you this about whatever it might be. Sexuality, it could be about alcohol, it could be about whatever it is, okay? And all you do is just remove that it's even simple just to say, I'm not going to believe in that God anymore that judges this action. And now I'm going to go do that action, be it sex or something, right? Now I get to have it with no guilt. Ex-Mormons chime in, ex-religious people, are you able to without guilt? Are you able to undo that conditioning by just not believing that God? Or do you need years of therapy because it is deeply ingrained? And it makes me think of like a tree that you ever see a tree that like grows and then it grows like around a fence or something. as it grows, you know,
Yeah.
and then they remove the fence, but the tree is still like mangled like this. That's what it does when you have really shitty conditioning around ideas. The idea is just so simplistic that, well, just get rid of the fence and now that tree gets to grow however it wants. It's got years of conditioning built around unhealthy ideas based on bad evidence, terrible ideas, old simplistic versions of how to live the best life, and the idea that you just can remove that, it's so stupid.
Yeah.
Not to mention, this is breaking news to me. Breaking news. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to keep this in, but this was the craziest thing that I've heard in a while, and I thought I've heard it all. I was talking to a dear friend of mine a couple weeks ago who is an ex-Mormon and who is gay. And he told me that the ex-Mormon men that he has sex with they have such a difficult time even having sex. They know that they're gay, they want to have sex with men, but most of them cannot keep an erection because it still triggers so much sin in them.
Yeah.
Because erections equal just sinful thoughts about men, and sinful thoughts about men lose their erection.
Yeah.
It's this horrible cycle that they're not actually able to enjoy sex. And so I even, up until a couple of weeks ago, I just even assumed that like, yeah, like you might have to like some bumps in the road early on, but like years into it, I'm sure that there's ex-Mormon men, everyone's just having a grand old time having the sex with the partners consensually and happily that they want to have. And they're still young men who've left the church and they cannot keep an erection without even like taking boner pills. And then I'll leave it there about the other stories that I heard. But I didn't even realize that years into it, it affects every single sexual encounter.
Yeah.
And it pissed me off more than I have ever been pissed off in a really long time about the church's homophobia, because there's just it's so unfortunate that there are these old white men in suits and coats in Salt Lake that can make decrees about individuals' expression of sexuality that should be so individual that now that is literally robbed from them their entire lives. But those guys, they can go back and have sex with their second wife, who's like, 20, 30 years younger than them. They get their sexuality is going to chug along just fine. But the things that they say completely rob people of ever having. Because I just assumed that, there's people leave the church and they can get there. They can get to a lot of people don't get there to ever having healthy sexuality ever. I made a wrong assumption on that, Kyle.
Yeah, that's a very heartbreaking example that really illustrates the point of how, I guess, why I consider childhood religious indoctrination to be abusive. Not just something that's frowned upon, but it's actually abusive, because these children have absolutely no say whatsoever, no intellectual faculties to contend with the ideas that they're being taught to believe. And so it's so easy for people to look at a religion they don't believe in and watch them being taught the kids being taught that religion. They go, oh my gosh, that's so evil. But you'll never see it in yourself. Everyone else is wrong. Again, we're back to the pain-pleasure dynamic of your brain. It would be painful to have to look at yourself and be critical of your own perspective, but it's so easy to see it in everybody else. And that's so wrong. And, through the years and years of this continually being dripped into their psyche, when they eventually come to the point where they leave the church, they consciously say, I don't believe that anymore. And subconsciously, the brain says, oh, yes, you do.
Yeah, your body keeps the score almost.
Yeah.
Your body retains, is that kind of what you mean? Like you can still have you can know intellectually things that your body still has not processed yet.
Yeah, that's how brainwashing works. You take children who have no way to defend themselves against something and you continually pump it into them that it creates their norm. And that norm is so hard to step away from. Like you said, I loved the fence analogy. It's like they don't just separate. Like the roots grow and they intertwine. And so when you pull one out, it's a mess down there, and you have to then go deal with that through years of therapy, and who knows if you ever get through it. And it's a very heartbreaking thing to see, especially because people have no problem with indoctrinating their children into their one and only true religion. But when they look at it everybody else's religion, it's like they can see what I see when I look at them, but they can't see it in themselves. And it's so frustrating because when you deconstruct, I mean, I don't think I'll ever get to the point where I don't realize, a thought will come to my head about, oh man, I didn't realize that was fucked up too. Like, that messed me up too. And you figure this out trial and error, because, I mean, it's so vast to consider. What is your belief system? Like, that entails everything, and you can't possibly be consciously aware of everything that it is. And so deconstructing that point of view, that that belief system that you had non-consensually pumped into your mind, drip, drip, drip every Sunday.
Ideas about where you came from, where you're going, what happens if you don't follow these rules. Every single drip affects your actions and grows those roots in a way that the day that you try to take some control over your life and the direction that it was, the trajectory that it's been set on, the day that you got, your baby blessing, the day that your mom found out she was pregnant with you and was praying that, you'll live an honest, true, faithful, like LDS life, all of the trajectory that you were on, the day that you start taking your life back it's a horrible, again, you're biased towards not taking your life back, but it's a horrible, painful process to try to rip yourself out from those roots when you're like, I will, at any cost, I want to believe the truth now.
Yeah.
And I always define atheism as just not having sufficient evidence to believe in a God. I don't have sufficient evidence to pray to any deity. If he made my brain, he, it, what, them, she, whatever out there made my brain, knows what evidence would be sufficient enough to convince me and decides to just play a little hide and seek. I guess we'll have a chat about it in the next life if there is one.
Yeah.
But they didn't make it really that necessary for me to care right now. So if you're at the place and the point where you're like, hey, that's me, I might also be an atheist.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about next, like, why in the world would you spend any more time hiding and suffocating in a place that isn't authentic to who you are? And we talked about the conditioning that goes into, needing your love from your family and friends. But what do you think, Kyle? What is, when people first recognize the bullshit, what makes it so difficult for people to be able to be themselves and authentically stand up that they don't believe in this church anymore, or that they're, trying to figure things out? We know so many people that are like in, mixed faith marriages, and they can hide it for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Like, what in your experience is holding people back from being authentic with themselves and then authentic with the people around them?
I mean, I think so. Initially, there's the inner struggle, and that's very hard to come to terms with all of that because it's so much pain that it's just like, it's so hard to, you need so many breaks in actually deconstructing your own faith that even if you get to the point where you realize that it's bullshit, it is a completely different battle that you now have to fight in leaving. The deconstruction community is so helpful because it's a whole bunch of people like that. What you just said, that's what I feel inside. Mm-hmm. And being able to connect in that way and, have that's, even if it's just a sentence, that's your new tool to be able to say, like, when your mom asks you, why aren't you wearing your garments? Boom, you have it. Because it's very hard. There's so much that's going on in your mind and in your heart that to be able to actually articulate that, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of trial and error. Like, I think anybody who's deconstructed looks back at how they left and how they told their family, and there's things they would do differently. But it's like they're doing the best with what they can. I mean, they're going through the most like soul-harrowing experience of their lives and then being expected to be completely polished in the way they articulate why they left. And that's an unrealistic expectation. And so one of the things that I always go over with clients, and it's not something that I just tell them, but it always comes up naturally, is that you need to give yourself a break. You're experiencing some of the most intense trauma that you've ever experienced. And so it's like, man, give yourself like a pat on the back, a rest for not saying that thing to your mom as nicely as you would have had, if you were given a chance to go back. Right.
Also, what I find is really helpful is having, whether it's like a mentor or a friend or somebody who's also deconstructing, whether it's a really in-person friend or like an online community. Because when you're first deconstructing and waking up to, I'm just going to be blunt, all of the ways that you were systematically lied to day in, day out for the majority of your life, it's so much to process, and you're coming with new information, and your brain's probably moving like a mile a minute, and you just want to talk to somebody. And the last thing you should be doing, in my opinion, is trying to unload on a believer, and especially somebody that you have a relationship with. And you're not going to do it well. It's going to ruin your relationships, and you're also probably going to fumble over your words. So what I'm trying to say is there's so much to process, and the sooner that you can find a friend to do that with. And so I have a Mormon Stories episode with my friend Lizzie Dapchinsky Bean, and we went through our faith crises together, and it was so helpful to sit down at Blaze Pizza for 4.5 hours and just literally word vomit every single thing that we've read lately, and to be like, did you hear about that? And Fanny Alger, oh my god, I heard about Fanny Alger too. Just like when you just have a million things that you want to say, and then you kind of get it all out there, and you're able to
Yeah.
finally like organize your thoughts, talk about it, just like unload with whether it's somebody who's like farther along on the faith crisis journey, who's just been down it. Because there's therapists who you don't need to waste your time explaining to them like what a stake president is and like why it is so difficult to be in a mixed faith marriage. Somebody who just kind of gets it is when they get it, they get it. And anytime where you can go through that unloading process with somebody
Yeah.
is so much better than having to figure it out on your own or blab about it to the people who raised you.
Yeah. And I think in addition to that, the church has done such a good job of demonizing people who leave, regardless of, their reasons why they leave. It's just, you're wrong and the devil has you. And that's a really challenging thing to navigate. And so when people leave, we start looking for people who are like us, who have come to the same conclusions about certain things that we have. And there's this quote that I wanted to share. It was my one, I have to share this thing because a lot of my clients have found it so useful. Because when you leave, it's very hard to kind of stay where you've been because it's so triggering to be there. The same phrases and the ways that people justify other people's suffering. It's just opposition in all things. And you hear that and it just drives you up the wall. Yeah. It makes it very challenging to maintain those relationships without, having an outburst and be like, no, that's wrong and here's why. And then they look at you like you're crazy because you're emotional, but like you're totally right to think that that's, justifying suffering in the world because, well, there has to be opposition in all things. It's like, it just makes you want to punch a wall. And so
Been there.
So we
Thanksgiving 2020.
Good times. Quote that I want to share with you guys, it's from Simon Sinek, and he says, "You have to do the things you actually believe. The things you say and do are symbols of who you are. We look for those symbols so we can find people who believe what we believe. If you're putting out false symbols, you will attract people you won't be able to form trust with. If you say what you believe and you do what you believe, you will attract people who believe what you believe."
Cue High School Musical, Troy and Gabriella singing. Can he be the basketball guy and the singer guy? Tune in to Disney Channel to find out the answer on that.
Yeah.
We're soaring. Are you getting my reference?
I've never seen it.
You're not getting my reference?
I'm
They're
not.
getting it.
I'm trying so hard to just be like, yeah.
The world can see us in a way that's different than who we are. Creating space between us. Stop me at any time. Till
I feel like
separate hearts.
Yep. So
Really, that's a great quote. I think literally that is the most intellectualized version of High School Musical 1 I've ever heard. But it's dope.
beautiful.
It's perfect.
They should put this in the credits, just like, we're going to sum up the movie for the people
based
who
on a
like,
true quote.
Yeah, based on a true quote. One thing I would actually add to the quote, the part where he says, if you're putting out false symbols, right after that I add, intentionally or not. Because there's a lot of things that like Mormon habits that we have,
Yeah.
and we keep doing them, and it's partially because, well, we don't have our new community yet, and we still want to be have some sort of, a community, and so we've kind of, we put out those things, and the people who are our real authentic tribe, who are like dying looking for people who are like us, they see the false symbol,
Yes.
and they're like, fuck. That person's not in the tribe. And so it's like there is a huge
So
price
right
that you
on.
pay, by hiding your authentic self, because the people who you would just click with can't find you because you're putting out a false image of what you're actually about.
How many people do you know that tried to do like the progressive Mormon route, and they're trying to put out symbols to people in one camp that we are down with, like your LGBT, the gay marriage, and we're also like super into like I hear you on like the systemic racism. Also, I'm gonna also perform and have a symbol to this tribe that I'm still over here with this guy's, and it never effing works.
Yeah.
Everybody always ends up leaving unless they get a book deal with like Deseret book, and it's like fiscally responsible of them to be a progressive Mormon. Other than that, they always leave because you recognize that the symbols
Yeah.
you're putting out are not authentic to what you really know. You always go the route of like, authentically speaking, I don't think it's a good idea to be in a church that was okay with racism for super, super long time.
Yeah.
Like, when I really calculate it anymore, that's not a symbol I want to put anymore because
Yeah.
that's not consistent with what I know in here because that's wrong. I cannot put up with it anymore.
I didn't even finish my story. didn't talk about how the one that I got her. The one I didn't talk about the
yeah.
gotcha of the whole story. I haven't talked about that
Do
yet.
this. What happened with the girl who was like, I already read this chapter? Did she finally say like
Yes.
no or yes that she knew what you were doing?
She's the most fascinating part of the entire story.
Really?
So she knew I was completely lying the entire time. And at the end, of course, I had her be the last person I asked. So you have like 20 yeses I will tell people about this and not a single no. And I ask her like, will you do it? And her look at me is just fire. She's like, I can't believe that you have duped all of these stupid people. Like she
Doing this?
knows 100% that it is a complete lie. And I'm like, but will you do it? And she goes, yes. So boom, the final yes, I got her. And it was so interesting because it also points out that there's a lot of people who realize the bullshit. There's a lot of, Germans in 1930s and 40s who are like, there's some bullshit going on here, but who still went along with it. And that probably crushed her, like when she went home and thought about what she did, how she totally sold her integrity out for the acceptance of a bunch of strangers in a classroom she's not going to see after the semester is over.
And like when you do that, when you accept that, like, okay, because even if she's just like, even though I don't technically believe it, I'll say that I believe it out loud. That's almost just like a small microcosm of, again, Nazis, the Holocaust, bigger picture things that people will go along with things that they absolutely disagree with, that they know are false, to keep in line with the bigger picture. And it's like, one is just like a classroom experiment to facilitate a point, and the other one is like mass genocide. Like that through line is like part of our human core.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. God has some explaining to do. Why did you program us this way?
Yeah, very interesting. And one of the things that I hate it when people come to the wrong conclusion about the point of that girl. They're like, man, what a piece of shit. I'm like, you completely, like, I wasted telling this story because you didn't get the point. The point is that you are that girl. That is you. You are just as wired for love and approval and, to be appreciated. And you only get that if you mesh with, what's going on in the classroom. And a symbolic classroom, which could mean your community, it can mean your nation, it could mean your family, it can mean your church.
All right, I got a question then for you.
Okay.
I have a person in mind that I'm thinking of right now who is Mormon and who is progressive as much as they can be, and they would argue with you and they'd say, no, everything goes. The reason why I'm a progressive Mormon, that I stay in the church against everyone in my family leaving, and that I have progressive values against everyone in my community who is conservative, goes against all of my conditioning. That I know that the church is more true and my progressive values are more true because I, time and time again, am studying this stuff and I am going against my conditioning to arrive at the opinions that I'm at.
Mm-hmm. I would say, why do you believe in a God that constantly needs people to reform things he already said? You have this religion that claims to be speaking for God. And a lot of the things that they claim to be true were blood atonement. Something so ridiculously violent and evil and wild that that should be the only thing you need to know about Mormon history to be like, yep, toodaloo. But there's slavery in the Bible. And then Jesus comes along and I'm not here to destroy the law, I'm here to fulfill it. He doesn't repudiate slavery. In fact, he teaches people how to treat their slaves. And there's all these things that, it's like, yeah, of course, we have every reason in the year of our Lord 2022 to say slavery is so awful. What kind of a tiny God do you believe in that he couldn't tell people to stop owning each other? Instead of telling us about germ theory, he was concerned about us eating shrimp and wearing clothes that had blended fabrics. Is there a t-shirt on the planet right now that does not have cotton and something else in it? It's so silly that would be the thing that attracts your God's gaze, while ethnic cleansing, genocide, genital mutilation, all these silly things are what he needed you to know. And of course, he only spoke to the most illiterate parts of the world who were goat herders in order to, bring in his message about, his will. The plot holes are just endless. And I get that people are like, well, I don't do that anymore, but you're completely jumping past the question of why was it there to begin with, and what does it suggest to you about the existence and or ethical capacity of your God, that they are there? And I don't get a lot of responses to that one.
Because it's this weird paradox of like, I know better than all of the prophets who have got it wrong, all of the scriptures who talk about horrible, atrocious things. I know better than all of them. Well, at the same time, I still am going to sustain leaders and pay tithing to a church where they believe all of those people were still prophets. They still say that the Bible is a companionship to the Book of Mormon and they work together flawlessly. So like, what is the point? If you say that you know better and you have all these great progressive values and you know better than the people in your church that are leading it, but you still want to be a part of it, why are you even there?
There's a Sam
This
Harris
doesn't
quote
make sense.
that we have to put in. It's that exact point in the most articulate way I've ever seen it.
More articulate than what I just said, impossible. Sam, get your notebook out. Nuance Ho is here to stay. I'm going to read Sam Harris's quote in less articulate language since I was already like, I explained it, and then Sam Harris, he probably time traveled and stole what I said, went back in time and probably wrote this quote.
He just paraphrased what you said.
Probably. So anyway, Sam Harris, like one of the greatest atheists of all time, he said, "It was even possible for the most venerated patriarchs of the church, like St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, to conclude that heretics should be tortured, Augustine, or killed, Aquinas. Martin Luther and John Calvin advocated the wholesale murder of heretics, apostates, Jews, and witches. You are, of course, free to interpret the Bible differently, though isn't it amazing that you have succeeded in discerning the true teachings of Christianity while the most influential thinkers in the history of your faith failed?"
Climax.
That's it! That's the whole thing!
It's like, well done. You were so much better than your perspective on slavery is so much more progressive than Jesus's, but that doesn't fit your narrative because that's putting Jesus below you because you came up with an idea better than him. And how can you come up with an idea better than the Son of God, who is also God?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Another person coming to mind, there's nothing more perplexing to me than this situation on the face of the planet. Mormons who sustain Russell M. Nelson, that he holds the keys to this entire church, sustain him as prophet, pay him 10% in tithing. The brethren pray about and know where all that tithing should be spent, what the curriculum should be in church, what this entire operation should look like, and it is led by Jesus Christ through the mouthpiece of that guy. They're on board with that concept, while also saying that when Russell M. Nelson puts his face in the hat saying this is how the Book of Mormon was translated, they think that that is a progressive historian's lie, and that Russell M. Nelson has that wrong, that the very keystone of their religion, the Book of Mormon, in which ushered in the entire restoration, for which the Russell M. Nelson even has the keys in for you to participate in the ordinances that he facilitates as the leader of this entire church led by Christ. See the circle I'm creating here? And they still say that he has that wrong of how that book came to be, and I have it right, while we understand that it was based on his predecessor's propaganda, and now he's trying to set it right. I'm still going to go with the predecessor's wrong opinions about how the Book of Mormon came to be. I'm going to go with their wrong opinions about how the Book of Mormon came to be. It was still Joseph Smith with his fingers on the plates, but they had that right then about how the Book of Mormon came to be. Are you following?
Yeah.
They had the wrong ideas about black people being fence sitters in heaven. They had the wrong ideas about God hating oral sex. They had the wrong ideas
About monogamy in
general. They had the wrong ideas about blood atonement. They had the wrong ideas about birth control. If you didn't know, Mormons used to be way against birth control, just so you know. It's not just a Catholic thing. They had the wrong ideas about that, but the thing about how the translation of the Book of Mormon happened, that they got right, and now we've undid a lot of that stuff, and now the new prophet, what they're telling us, he has all these other things right, but the thing about the Book of Mormon he has wrong. I prayed about it, and God feels good about it, and that conditioning that I went with of the story that I've been told and fed about how the Book of Mormon came to be, I'm still going to go with that one. Oh, and supersede the very person that I sustain. Did that make sense?
That, kids, is called cognitive dissonance.
And they get mad at me
How dare you
for pointing it out.
How dare you be so sensible and rational in your arguments?
You have to pick one. You kind of got to pick one. Like, either you got to really lower down what a prophet means. Like, the bar of being a prophet needs to be absolutely what is almost the even point.
Yeah.
It is just like worse than an accountant that you call up for advice on your taxes. Like, it has got to just be an old person who has opinions that you can take it or leave it. That's pretty much the bar you're setting for prophets, are you not? If you're just allowed to make up whatever you want to say about the truth of God, the nature of salvation, how we get there, what we should feel guilty of, all of that stuff, it's kind of just like this picking and choosing.
Yeah. Well, they've rigged the system so that their prophet is a prophet. He does something good, well, he's a prophet. Does something terrible, he's still a prophet. Like, it's like there's some way to justify it. So it's like when they ask you to read and pray about the Book of Mormon. Like, so you read the Book of Mormon, you pray about it. You know, God says, yes, this is my one and only true church. Like, great, that was revelation. And if you don't come to that conclusion, it's like, try again. Why are you watching porn? Why don't you have the Spirit? God can't really talk to you. You're hearing a weird message. All roads lead to, our church is true. These people are prophets. The Book of Mormon is true.
That quote about putting out false symbols is the crux of why so many people leave the church. And it's actually a video that I've been planning on recording with Mark Oslin coming in. Because what I'm so impressed about Mark Oslin, if you don't know, he was a convert to the church when he was like 17 years old, was going to go play Major League Baseball, converted to the church, went a different path in life, and became a seminary teacher. And he was so oriented towards talking and teaching about Jesus in such a radical way to his students that time and time again he was fighting with his leaders, his bosses in the church education system, because what led me out, what led him out, what led out a lot of people is that we are trying to live so radically towards this Christ-centered view of loving and accepting people and doing as much as that we can try to do to live like Christ, because that's what we're supposed to do in this church, right? And then coming up against a brick wall over and over again that there's other people in the church who don't want you to live a very Christian life. And you feel like the symbol that I'm putting out into the world, I want to be known as being a very Christ-like person who's very loving, and I want people to see Christ when they're with me and like me. There's so many Mormons that live that life. I tried to live that life. Mark did. So many of my friends and family are trying to live the most loving, authentic Christ life. And then what you'll find is that there are other people in your circle, because of the dogmas that exist in Mormonism, whether it's you're teaching a Relief Society lesson that's not on script, or it's you teaching a seminary lesson, or whatever it is, you're going to come up against people who the symbols that you're putting out that might to you seem very Christ-like and very authentic to what you feel like he taught, and go against the dogmas and the prescriptions of what Mormonism teaches you. When you go up against that, something has to win, and you're conditioned to kind of go along with some very unhealthy parts of Mormonism. I think back to like when I was like a Mormon woman in the church. There's some really healthy parts of it, but most of those healthy parts came from me trying to live a Christian life, if you will. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Like trying to carry my cross, do hard things, sacrifice for others, be very service oriented. If anyone needed anything, if somebody needed a ride to the bishop's storehouse, that you do the hard thing and you substitute your will for like thy will be done, O Lord. And it's usually something that makes you feel closer to God, because when you live selflessly, blessings happen and just rewarded you, and then you're hit head on with people who want you to serve their dogmas and serve their confines and want you to now obey Christ under their box and in their prescription that doesn't feel authentic. So the whole point I'm trying to make here is, you're gonna live a life where the way that you act is gonna put out symbols to each other. And how unfortunate, how obviously untrue if the very system, the very church that you are existing in, the symbols that you're putting out are good symbols. What I was doing was a good symbol. I was trying my hardest to be a Christian. You know what I mean? In that sense, I was trying my hardest. And when you're combated with people who don't want you to live to that type of version of Christianity, they want you to live it to their symbols, and that clash of two worlds of like, don't love gay people that much, where are you getting this from? Oh, it's this stupid dogma that was created by these old white guys, or like, does that make sense? Like the very symbols that you put out are so often, they're good things that I learned in the church. They're good principles in religion that I was trying to live out the most of. but when you're stuck in like the people spinning their wheels in these dogmatic circles, obeying stupid authority figures that are basing their ideas on ideas that were maybe popular 50 years ago that are not informed by evidence or empathy,
Yeah.
how frustrating that is, and how many people just need to rip themselves away from it.
And it's bad when people are doing so much better, like, that aren't part of his church, because it's like, what's the point of your church if people who wholesale reject the entire system can get better results, live happier lives, and become better, more inclusive, loving people? Like, what is the point of your church? That's why I'm an atheist.
I live a life that is really happy and is really awesome, and I am much happier on this side of Mormonism. I'm authentic, that I call a spade a spade. It sucks when you go to, you're like, oh, it's just not a, Mormonism is, it's not only like got problems with it, it's a literal made up thing. It's a literal not true thing. Just calling a spade, and then with that information, just trying to live a more authentic life to what does evidence say? What is my empathy telling me? What do I need to get curious about that I maybe haven't questioned before?
Yeah.
And like, how can you not be happy living without those types of confines that I had within Mormonism? I'm able to like love authentically more, be myself more, say the F word.
Yeah.
Things that we all just in our heart of hearts want to do.
As my companion just told you, I also know that what she said is some pretty fucking good logic. It makes some sense. So anyway, take an ounce of skeptical truth over a bucket of faith. Finding yourself is not how it works. You aren't a $10 bill found in last winter's coat pocket. You are not lost. Your true self is right there, buried under the cultural conditioning, the opinions of others, and inaccurate conclusions you thought were true about who you are. Finding yourself is actually a returning to yourself, an unlearning, an excavation, a remembering who you were before the world got its hands on you. Emily McDowell.
Thank you, Emily.
Emily's the bomb.
She participated in such a, I wasn't sure she was going to show up, but I'm really grateful that she did.
She's late, but she's here.
Yeah.
That's our podcast episode in a quote.
All right, last thing, because that reminds me, I am of the opinion that every baby is an atheist, meaning they are not told what God's name is, who to worship, how to pray, with the caveat that we are born with this intrinsic sense of wonder, trying to figure out the world, and we are naturally oriented towards, again, making up bullshit things. And so I've had, Mormons and Christians argue with me on that point, that no, kids are not born atheists. Like, we are all born with like the light of Christ, and then we go find that, and you might find it in Hinduism, or you might find it in like Buddhism, but you all have the light of Christ. And how bullshit that is to me. You're still just putting your label of what somebody told you to now what you're telling other people to label it. Like, they don't see the logic in that. Like, nobody told you to label that the light of Christ until somebody told you to label that. So anyway, I love that idea that like we don't need to be going after ourselves like we're absolutely lost. What does that quote mean to you personally?
I think the biggest thing for me is that realizing that my true self was there, that it wasn't lost. And it also gave me this exciting thing to now go do, which was to research
Have sex
myself.
with women.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, it's always that. Like, your true self is always just like, I rediscovered that I like having like drunken orgies or something. No, I'm just kidding. You are going after finding your authentic self, and that authentic self is telling you to do what?
Yeah, so I liked that. So after being told for so many years, this is what you are, this is who you are, this is your role in the universe, there's the plan of salvation, this is you, this is where you are. To get rid of that and to realize that because that's not true, there must be something that's true about me, and now I get to go explore it. And so I got super into like learning me with I have a blank canvas in front of me, and while that was terrifying, it was also exciting because it reopened the question, who am I? And that was it's something that because I realized that there were so many things that I thought I was that I wasn't, simply because that was the way that my family culture was, or because I was born in America, so I'm going to believe these things, or because, whatever, I'm a I'm a Caucasian male in the United States. There are going to be certain things that are just
You're
kind
the
of
enemy.
prescribed. This is
Sorry.
who you are. I know. And so to reopen identity was so exciting for me, and I went down
Yeah.
so many rabbit holes, and it was so fun to question. Like, you know, I'm at a crossroads, and it's like, the Kyle that I know would go this way, so I'm fucking going this way, and it opened up different people, different
Interesting.
perspectives. It's like it was so exciting to have all these periods about me turn into question marks about me, and
So
it
good.
reopened the case for me to discover who I am, and that has been the funnest thing. And I've also given myself a lot of permission to fuck up all the time.
Yes.
Because it's not about adhering to a set standard that was imposed on me by my
Just
childhood
make sure that the
indoctrination.
growth curve is going up. That's how I think of
True.
it. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to mess up along the way and you're not going to do things perfectly, but giving yourself like grace that, you know, you guys, you probably just like left a cult. You might not like know
Yeah.
some social norms on some stuff. Like,
Yeah.
we'll forgive you.
It's
Keep
an
the growth
awkward.
curve going up though.
Yeah, it's an
The
awkward,
trend.
clunky process. But if you find yourself like snorting cocaine off a dead hooker's thigh, maybe time to reevaluate.
Where's
Maybe
my
that's
phone? Cancel my 7 o'clock. Wouldn't that be so sweet? Oh my gosh, my dream of all dreams is if I could get people in the comments to write who have gone through this kind of process. Because I think if you're a well-intentioned person who's really trying to figure out the truth of the world and you come to the conclusion that Mormonism isn't true and then you end there, like that was a waste. So like then what happened? Like tell us your story.
Yeah.
Like and then who did you discover you were?
Yeah. It's like in
Go
contrast to who you thought you were, who are you now?
Oh, because can I go first? Just because
Yeah.
just two things. When you're a woman in the church, ladies, and you are raised that the highest calling in life is going to be a mother and a wife, and everything, I am the nuance hoe. There are grains of truth in so many things. It is so nuanced. Like being a woman and motherhood and the things the church said that are so true and so instinctual to who I am and wanting to nurture and have kids, but then saying that that's the whole picture. So who was I in the church? My entire trajectory was to pleasing my husband. First of all, getting a husband, all of the shit that goes into that, the mind fuck.
Yeah.
Like your pursuit in life is to
Yeah.
like find a worthy priesthood holder, and like that's the top of the list. And the other things we kind of fill in. Husband's very lovely. He's great. He's in the other room taking care of the kids. This isn't a diss on him. I'm just saying like the reasons why you even get married are because somebody else gave them to you. The reasons why you have kids, I think there's instinctual, there's evolution, obviously, but then the reasons that how many you have and how young you have them and the place that you have them, like the decisions that you have about your life were
Yeah.
all kind of made before I was even born in a lot of ways. Right?
Yeah.
So who am I? I'm like, okay, if I was a more mom, I'd be like my talents are like I give like really creative lessons in Sunday school and in Relief Society, and I love kids and I'm really good with coming up with activities for them, and I like to tell jokes sometimes, and like I like to mess around and riff, like I like this movie and these are my favorite comedians and stuff. I would downplay my truest, most authentic self to make sure that I was posturing to my community
Yeah.
around me that like, don't worry, like I'm still like totally a trad wife, you know? Like, and now I'm like, obviously I love my kids. Like, obviously I love my husband. Obviously, like I built this life and there's a lot of good things into it. But then I would have made some other decisions too if I was able to be authentic, if I knew that I was more talented than I gave myself credit for instance. So like, who am I now post-Mormonism? I'm like, my heart and soul resides in like comedy and thinking of like content and explaining things and reading really interesting books that explain the world around me and like the concepts that Sapiens goes into and
Yeah.
Tribe and Guns, Germs, and Steel and like human evolution and like what do I spend the rest of my life doing? It would be like teaching and talking and like communicating and going to faith crisis retreats with people who are downtrodden. Like my heart and soul resides in. And one thing that my patriarchal blessing got right, my patriarchal blessing said then, again, grains of truth and everything, it said that when you always go, my patriarchal blessing has this language that like, you're always looking for the people who are downtrodden and who are having a hard time in life.
Yeah.
And at 16, when I got my patriarchal blessing, I was like, the church is extra true because I always do that. And a lot of people do that. But like,
Yeah.
I do feel like if I wasn't doing this, I would go into therapy or coaching or just like helping people negotiate the problems of life. So those things were never on the forefront of my mind when I was in the Mormon church. because I had other more important long-term salvation-oriented
Yeah.
goals to worry
Yeah.
about. And now I get to step into the authenticity of like what I care about, what gets me up in the morning, what like gets me excited about
Yeah.
life, what gets me through the next, 50 years that I'm going to have to live.
Yeah. You finally get to be you, and
Yeah,
you're
man.
totally free to explore that, and
Woo, woo.
you step away from the script. You don't have to read the script anymore, and that's so exciting. Albeit a little bit terrifying for a lot of people because it's like, what am I supposed to say? It's like, act. It's like, I don't know how to act.
Yeah, and
I'm
what
good
you
at
just said, like
following.
the exact reason why I do this, why you do this, why so many of like the ex-Mormon content creating kind of crowd does this, because we know how great it is on this side and how authentic you can be and how expansive your brain is,
Yeah.
but also how terrifying it is, and like anything I can do to help make it easier, because this other side, it's not a life of sin. It's not a life of
Yeah.
just like being persuaded by the devil to go be like in his chains, being dragged down to hell. Like we were conditioned to believe since we were kids that this sin will lead to this one, and now Satan's
Yeah.
got you by a grasp. Like I was conditioned to believe the most horrible things about myself, and the idea that I live a fully authentic life without an ounce of guilt about it anymore means I've done a little bit of work on it, and also means that like it's so much better on this side, and like all I want to do is like my heart and soul is in like helping people make
Yeah.
those connections so that they can live in this joy too.
When other people can have that
Be
same
invited to the orgy
experience.
that I'm gonna miss out on.
Exactly. I was like, I remember being so afraid of like it's just going to be misery on the other side, and then you leave, and it's so empowering. Like I realized that all the things that I was afraid of were like they're paper tigers. Like they're
Yeah.
outwardly fearsome but totally weak, and they can't hurt you.
Right on. Right on.
Life
We're here for you.
lessons.
I mean,
We got you, especially if you feel alone. Because it's not uncommon for me to have people say that if this doesn't work, I'm ending my life. And that's a big thing. There's a lot of people who are in that space, and there's a lot of people who are reaching out because they're desperate for help. And I want you to feel not awkward about it. There's so many of us who are going through this dead end life that you don't believe, but you can't handle what somebody thinks about you. It's like you could move towns and solve most of that. You can cut ties with people who aren't okay with you being who you are. Why would you want to stay there anyway? It's like, especially when there's so many people who are desperate to have you as their friend, because they love the people who are like you. You just have to find your group. So no more false symbols.
perfect.
Get it out of here.
Get out of there. You're projecting things. People are like, is that you? When you're like, yes. They're like, what was that wink about? I was like, that's me. They're like, I can't tell if you're serious or not. Like, is this the authentic you? Definitely. All right. Okay. Well, that's weird. It'd just be
Yeah.
easier if you didn't wink and just said, yes, this is my real authentic self. But everything in religion comes with I was conditioned to be like this. And
We love everyone.
it was I am as authentically believing that God didn't want black people to have the priesthood until 1978, and then he just conveniently changed his mind 10 years after the civil rights movement.
He was waiting on us.
He was
we
waiting
weren't
on
waiting
us.
on him.
Yeah, wouldn't it just be so much easier to be authentic, Kyle? And just to be like, even if I was Mormon, couldn't I just be like, wow, the prophets, they know literally nothing, and there's some nice old white guys that I need to respect to be able to stay in this religion. Can we just call the truth the truth?
Nope. Hide who you are. Don't ever let your parents know that you don't believe what they do, and just live a life of servitude to this ideology that has been so dead that there's not even bones
I mean,
left.
less than 1% of the people alive on planet Earth are even like getting with it. I don't know. Just like I'm at that point, I'm just like kind of get curious. Like, why not? Like,
Yeah.
why is it not taken off like wildfire? And even if your reason was like Satan stopping them or like people aren't ready or whatever, why are you living it then? Because your God probably doesn't care about the rest of the planet, everyone who's ever living it. So maybe like there's some authenticity you should be like exploring. I don't know. It's my life coach advice of like, just really do whatever you feel like. I'm living my life over here. I don't really care what you do. I just hope you're like doing well and like are kind of like a good person generally. If I had to like give you if I had a hope for you.
Just remember that your value is tied to what strangers think about you, so don't fuck it up, okay? That's where your value comes from. You need to
Sarah,
really,
seriously.
really
I'm
just...
just hoping there's somebody out Sarah out there who just like felt called out.
Ben!
I was gonna say Ben. Ben Jones.
I
There's
think
a
that
fucking
probably-
Ben Jones out there, and he is called the fuck out right
You know what
now.
that was? That
What?
was
The
Harrison
Spirit?
Ford. No, Han Solo when he says, Ben! Right before he
Oh.
gets Spoiler alert, you should have seen it by now, so I don't apologize for anything. But
Spoiler alert. So sorry about the spoiler alert. I didn't say that about the High School Musical stuff. In the end of High School Musical 1, Kyle, Gabriella and Troy, even though they have a lot of differences in their interests and expectations.
Who's
in
Zac
their
Efron?
Yeah, Zac Efron is Troy.
Okay.
He's the basketball guy, and Gabriella is like the drop dead gorgeous like science geek, and they end up together. I'm sorry, spoiler alert on that, but they put their different interests aside and decide that they're all in this together. Once we know who we are, we're all stars and we see that. I also know the entire
wait, do you know the dance? Okay, I was like, that's actually like, it looked more choreographed than.
Spoiler alert, I know the dance. Sorry. Well, this wraps up this incredible video with my friend Kyle over here, who I'm so grateful just brought all of his knowledge and life experience and college trickaroos and came and like let us just bask in the joy of recognizing that, you know what? Bullshit pumped into our brains throughout our life. The choice is yours at Checkorama and in life.
Have it your way.
Have it your way at
Burger
BK.
King. The BK Lounge.
That's the Burger King reference. I only speak in ad campaigns because this is all about bullshit and being propagandized to your entire life. So I only know how to speak.
This was all part of the plan from the beginning.
Loving it. So thanks so much for watching this video. What do you want to plug, Kyle? Isn't Kyle the best? Okay, go follow Kyle under Kyle Glenn Bishop on Facebook, Beyond God and Religion on Instagram and TikTok.
Yep.
And then do you have a website?
Yeah, it's beyondgodandreligion.com. And I know that it's awkward to make the first step and be like, hey, I need help. I just set up a phone call with people. It's free. It's just us shooting the shit for a half hour. I explain very clearly what it is that my program does. We see if it's a fit for you. If it is, great. If it's not, wonderful. There's tons of people in the post-religion, post-Mormonism space who are fantastic at being able to help people because it's a lot to navigate.
You all know all the places to follow Kyle. Links will be in the description below. If you like this content, I need a lot of encouragement to make it because remember those kids I was talking about earlier? Really like hard to mom. Just like a lot of stress around here, like trying to make money and like trying to make content and like any encouragement that you want to give me and any, value that you get from this, let me know because I love doing it. I love making content. I love talking about these things. I would do it forever. Just got a lot of stuff in my life that's just kind of hard to balance everything. But your old girl Kara, she always pulls through, so I'll be fine. But if you want to support this work on Patreon, it like literally means the world to me. The monthly donation really helps me out a lot. And, through small and simple things, great things occur. And so I'm able to pay my bills a little bit more through YouTube, being subscribed to this channel, hitting the like button, sharing it. You know the whole spiel YouTubers do. I'm getting used to it. Anyway, Kyle, any other last words?
Nope. Life is good.
All right.
Don't be in a cult.
I'll try. Just taking notes on how to start my own. Nuanco out. Kyle, do something.
Nuance Ho.